Okay, so first of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Michal. I'm from Israel, and I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner, and I'm a singing teacher and a CBT therapist. So none of those has to do with the pelvic floor, but I developed a method that teaches how to restore and to rehabilitate the pelvic floor. And nowadays, the accepted method, the accepted way to access and to practice the pelvic floor is actually to isolate it. So when women feel that their pelvic floor is weak, and usually they feel it when there is a problem, usually with controlling the urine or with prolapses. So then the methods are to practice certain muscles, a certain area, and this is what I call isolating the pelvic floor. But actually, the pelvic floor is part of our functions, certain very main functions of our body, like the posture and like the breathing. So if we would have used this muscular system, the pelvic floor, as part of those functions, so it would have not degenerated. But it's a big issue how to access, how to feel, and how to bring those muscles, this muscular system, that we feel it, that we are aware of it. And this is something that is not difficult, and it's very interesting to reach it. And with the certain functional instructions, we can get to sense it. And then it's lovely because we can combine it, integrate it into our daily functions, and then it doesn't degenerate. Sensing the pelvic floor, we cannot see it, we cannot touch it. So how will we bring the pelvic floor to a situation that we feel it? We have one sense that we are not aware of and so much, and this is the kinesthetic sense. A kinesthetic sense is a sense of movement. So if we are able to reach the pelvic floor in the way that we move it, then we can start feel its location, its function, its movement. Another important part of the urinary control and the control on our inner organs is the transverse muscles of the belly, that they are the most inner layer of among the muscles of our belly wall, the abdominal wall. And they're very important. Again, we're not so much aware of them, but they're very important in locating the inner organs in their right place. So to prevent prolapses, for example. And they're actually very they're a very important part of the function, the basic functions of the pelvic floor, including controlling the urine. So usually, as I said, we're aware of other muscles of the abdominal wall, of the adductor muscles, and when we do, I think it's called crunches, and then we're using the muscles, the rectus abdominis muscles, the muscles that fold us, and they're the one that we sense easily because it's a different muscular system. It's muscles that belong more to contracting the body. So these are muscles that work intensively and for short term. But the muscles that are part of the posture are different muscular system, and then we can sense less. It's, for example, it's like the back muscles that we don't sense them until we have back pain. Okay? But it's the same. The sensation of those muscles is quite delicate. So, but it's possible to sense it, and they're very important, as I said. So it's important to strengthen them, and also the way to strengthen them is not the same as the adductor muscles. So, but we would like to start to see the presentation, and you will see those muscles that I spoke about in the presentation, and it will help you understand what I'm speaking about. So first, again, you will see a few words about me and what I do. And maybe I can say that I combine, one interesting thing that I can say about this CBT, that I developed a way to help women with the upset bladder, that this is something that many women suffer from. It's when the bladder contracts without us able to control it. And it happens suddenly, and actually it involves very much our emotions and mental side. So I developed a path in CBT to help women to feel what they do in their body when the bladder contracts strongly. So this I can add to the CBT, that it seems like it has nothing to do with the pelvic floor, but actually there is a connection through this phenomena of upset bladder. So let's start to look at the pelvic floor. I think that it's very important for us to look at the structure, at the anatomy of the pelvic floor and the whole area, because this helps us function with it better after we see it, after we see how it looks. So it helps us access it in a better way. So what we see here, this is the front of the pelvic, it's the pubic bone, and this is the back of the pelvis, it's the spine. These are blood vessels, and these are nerves. We speak less about them. I just mention it so you know what it is. These are the crest bones on the sides of the pelvis. This is the uterus, and this is the rectum. And it's cut, it's dissected here. And the bladder is under the uterus. This is also one thing that we have to know, that sometimes we have urge with the bladder that it contracts because the uterus is above it. And if the uterus is losing its height with the age, so then it might affect the feeling of urge with the urine system. Here is the hip joints, and those two openings are a place where the certain muscles of the legs are connected. So this is the bony part of the pelvis. So again, this is the sacrum, the lower back, and this is the coccyx, the tailbone, and these are the crest bones that we saw before. This is the pubic bone. These are the hip joints, where the legs are connected, the thighs, the thigh bones. And these are the openings that I spoke about, the certain muscles of the legs. The adductor muscles of the legs are connected here. And this is a front up view. No, I don't remember the word. On the pelvis. This again is the spine, and these are the crest bones, and this is the pubic bone, and here we see the thigh bones, and this is the muscular system of the pelvic floor. So we see that the pelvic floor is not only sphincters, and it's very important to understand it, because this system is part of our posture. And if we don't activate it as part of the posture, so it degenerates And it also affects the back and affects the inner organs of the pelvis, and it's quite dramatic in our in the healthy function of our body. This opening, this sphincter, is the anus, and in this opening we have two tubes that pass the vagina and the urethra, the pipe of the urine. This is a wider look on, actually I call it, this area, it's like a house, that we have the pelvic floor, that is the floor, and we have the diaphragm muscle, which is the ceiling, and we have the back. In the back and in the front, we don't see it here, there is the belly that we will see later with its muscles, and it's the belly wall. And the role of the belly wall is to, as I said a little bit before, is to locate the inner organs in their place. So if the belly wall is weak, then this might be the beginning of a prolapse. We see here psoas muscles that connect the back to the hip joint, and the pelvic floor is here under. We don't see it so much here. We can see the connection of the diaphragm muscle to the vertebra in the back. It's not accurate. It's two connections, but they're not connected to the same vertebra, but it doesn't matter so much. Okay, here we see the pelvic floor, feminine pelvic floor from the side. Here the organs are complete, and here they are dissected, sorry. We will start watching here in the complete organs. We see, first of all, we see here the pubic bone, and we see here the sacrum and the coccyx. We see how the pelvic floor is connected to the coccyx, the upper part of the coccyx in the back, and in the front is connected to the pubic bone. This is the anus, and this is the pelvic floor. This is the rectum, the vagina and the uterus, and this is the bladder. And here in the dissected illustration, we see again the rectum and the anus. We see the vagina and the uterus, and this is the bladder, and here we see the urethra. The length of the urethra is about 3-4 centimeters in women. It's much shorter than in men. Here it looks like an open space, but it's not. It's the intestine space. Okay, so what are the main tasks of the pelvic floor? So what we all know is that it controls sphincters and that it supports the pelvic organs. As we said, that it's very important that the function of the pelvic floor, I mean, if the pelvic floor is too weak, it's too loose, then it will not be able to support, we will not be able to support the pelvic organs. And supporting and stabilizing the back and the posture. As we saw before, the pelvic floor is the floor of this structure. So if the floor is not in its place and it's too loose, then it's affecting the back, it's affecting the walls of this structure, and it's affecting the ceiling. The diaphragm muscle will have to be much more active and to overwork to compensate. And then it might affect the back and back pain, and it might affect the position of the chest. It goes also vice versa, that if there is tension in the chest and the chest is stiff, rigid, so it will affect also the intra-abdominal pressure and will affect also the pelvic floor. And another task of the pelvic floor is stabilizing the sacrum and the hip joints. When those muscles, the muscular system of the pelvic floor is too loose, so it's not possible to have a connection, a good connection between the two legs. So it feels, when you see a woman walking and the pelvic floor is weak and the whole system, the whole area is weak. So you feel that there is no connection between the two legs. So of course she's walking, she's able to walk, but it feels like one leg is going forward and then the other leg is going forward. It doesn't feel like walking. And when the pelvic floor is working properly, then there is the connection is more intact, I think is the word. And sexual function, this also we're usually more aware of, but maybe it's important to say that the muscle tones of the pelvic floor is very important also for sexual function, not only if there is prolapses, and this is quite obvious that it will affect the sexual function, but also the muscle tone of the vagina, for example. This illustration is not so accurate, but I would like to explain about prolapses with this illustration. So we see here, the prolapses can be in the vagina. A prolapse is when the organ loses its height and drops down. So it can happen in the vagina, it can happen in the uterus, it can happen in the bladder, in the urethra, and in the rectum, and also in the intestines. Usually, what happens is that the organ loses its height and prolapse into the vagina. So if there are 4 degrees of prolapses, if the degree is high, so the organ will come out folded in the vagina. So actually, what the doctor has to see is not only if there is a prolapse, but also to see which organ is it that is folded in the vagina, because it can be in the rectum, and it can also happen with the bladder and the prolapse into the vagina. And sometimes the uterus. This is quite often among the prolapses that the uterus drops, prolapse, and again into the vagina, and then in severe cases the uterus is out. Okay, so what's important to know, and what attitude I bring that is very important to understand. Our body works according to functions. This means that, for example, if I would like to get my back muscles to work, if I put the feet on the floor and I shift the weight on my feet, then my back will also work, because the brain connects between the different organs that are part of certain function. And why is it important? Why is it important concerning the pelvic floor? Because, as I said before, we don't feel the pelvic floor and we don't see it. Sometimes we feel it, but more the organs that control the urinating system. So, to feel how the pelvic floor is part of our posture, how can we do it? So, this is through the function of the posture. If we know how to combine the pelvic floor back as part in its natural place, as part of this function of the posture function, so we will be able gradually to feel it more and more. So as I said, there is a posture sequence and there is the breathing sequence, that with both of them we can access the pelvic floor and sense its movement. In long term, it is more the posture sequence that we need the pelvic floor to be part of, because this will affect our daily functions in a very significant way. But there is also the breathing sequence, and this is important in the beginning when we start to try to access the pelvic floor. Then it's important to reach it through the breathing sequence because it's much easier to access it in this way. Here we see the 3 layers of the abdominal muscles. The 2 outer layers are dissected in this side, so we don't see them here. On this side, we see only the inner layer, which is the transverse abdominis. Here, in this side, we see the most outer layer, which is the rectus abdominis. These are the muscles that we know from the crunches. Again, if I hope I say it right. And these are the diagonal muscles, the oblique muscles that we're more aware, that we're less aware of, and usually they function properly. They also need the transverse abdominis, the most inner layer, to function in a good and efficient way. So the most inner layer, as I said, is the transverse abdominis muscles, which are part of the posture. They are postural muscles. And we have them from the pubic bone and until the chest. And they're going all around the body, wrapping the body like a belt. They are our natural belly belt. Here we see it even in a more clear way. And it's very nice to see it. You can really see how they're like a belly belt. And actually, if women are using belly belt, if they have problems of prolapses, then if they're not aware of those muscles, then they will use them less and less because the belly belt is doing the work of those muscles. And it's not even difficult to bring those muscles, to activate those muscles. It just takes a while. It's like a small baby when you put it on its belly. And in the beginning, it's difficult for the baby to lift its head, to lift his head, but it happens. So also with those muscles, it takes a while, but we practice more and more, and it's there. And it's not tough practicing like the flexors muscles. Well, this slide is more for to see the beginning of the rectus abdominis, the muscles that contract us, and to see how many muscles we have in the chest and also that connect the shoulders to the chest, and to clarify that when we make effort in our over effort in our shoulders and shoulder blades, and also in the neck, it limits the ability of the chest to move, to be flexible, and it makes the chest more rigid, and this will affect the pelvic floor, because when the chest is rigid, then our ceiling, as we saw before, the diaphragm muscle will be also rigid. We will not be able to move it with a movement. Of course, it moves with the breathing, but also this gets more limited. And this is why many times we feel that we are not able to breathe in a sufficient way. And these are also the neck muscles, which are also connected. If there is no, for example, just to understand what effect different parts of the body has on our pelvic floor. If there is no movement between the head and the shoulder, if there is stiffness and between the head and not the shoulder, sorry, the back of the neck, then this will affect also the chest, and this will affect our ability to be tall. And if we don't know how to raise our body, how to grow, how to be tall, then this will affect the pelvic floor, because the pelvic floor will not be able to go up if there is intra-abdominal pressure above it, and if the organs above it doesn't know how to move. Here what we see is abdominal separation, which is called diastasis recti. And if you remember, those muscles are called rectus abdominis. Okay, and it's the most outer layer of our belly muscles. And it's the muscles, as I said, that contract us. And it's a very not accurate illustration, but just for to understand the phenomena of abdominal separation. So those two muscles, that one on one side and the other one on the other side, get more and more further one from the other until there is a separation in the middle. It can happen during pregnancies, but it can happen also in other, for example, if the belly is big, okay? And it can happen not only in this area of the navel, it can happen also up, and it can happen also down. And sometimes the body rehabilitates itself, and those muscles come back one towards the other. But sometimes the tissue that is in between, which is called the linea alba, is get torn. And the best way to rehabilitate this whole issue is by strengthening the rectus, the transverse abdominis that we saw before, the muscles that wrap and that go all around the body. Sometimes the separation is big, but the inner layer of the muscles will be still strong, so it will not be so dramatic. And sometimes the separation is not so big, but the inner layer is very weak. So when you come to check the separation and you put your fingers in this area that is separated, you feel that it's like a jelly, that it's so soft. So of course, this can gradually cause prolapses, because if we're speaking about the belly abdominal wall, that they hold the inner organs in their place. So if it's so weak, then of course there is nothing to hold the organs in their place. Okay, we can make I will stop now the screen sharing, and we will demonstrate a little bit exercise of the breathing sequence and of the posture sequence. We will start with the posture sequence, and I would like to ask you, if you don't feel, then don't think that no, it's hopeless. It's just if our muscles are weak, or if we're not aware of it, then it takes a while to feel it, but usually it doesn't take long. Okay, so as I said, we start with breathing, with a posture sequence. So let's think that in our lower belly, we have a zipper, and we would like to close the zipper. And the zipper is a little tight, so when we close it, we have to collect our belly. So do it, and you will see that your body gets taller when you do it. And this is actually activating the transverse belly muscles. And this emphasizes, when we do it and we get taller, this emphasizes the connection that the abdominal transverse abdominis muscles has with the posture. But let's start in a different way. Let's start by taking our back backwards, that we're a little round. The back is round. And then let's get taller, and in the same time, let's close this imaginary zipper. And let's try to stay there until we count to 6. You will see that it's not so easy because we're not used to activate those muscles. And then after a while, open the zipper. And when you will open the zipper, you will see how you get shorter, how the back gets round, because it doesn't have so much support. So again, close the zipper. And in the same time, think that in the bottom of your body, you have kind of a round muscular system, and you would like to make it go up. Instead of leaving it round, it goes a little bit upwards, like 2-3 centimeters, and it goes along with the body. So the body gets longer, taller, and then you can enable the pelvic floor to go up. And again, stay for a few seconds with this. It might be that you will not feel that there is a movement in the pelvic floor, and it's okay. We will feel it more with the breathing sequence. And after a few seconds that you stay like this, open the zipper and leave the pelvic floor. And again, you will see that the whole posture is getting loose because it doesn't have the support of the floor and of the abdominal wall. And again, roll the pelvis forward and choose the position for the pelvis that is not too forward, that the belly doesn't protrude out, but that the position of the pelvis is supporting the posture in a good way. And again, you close the zipper. The zipper you can close until the navel or maybe a little lower than this, and bring up the pelvic floor and stay there for a while. Few seconds, and let it down. And now let's add something to it. We will add something from the breathing sequence, and this will help you to understand the movement of the pelvic floor, of the bottom of your body. So again, we roll the pelvis and we close the zipper. But in the same time, we think that there is a narrow straw in our mouth, and we inhale through this straw. And after we did it, we leave our lips, but we don't leave the support that we got doing this kind of breathing. And now leave the support and try to feel if you feel that the bottom of the body gets heavier or gets more loose and or come closer to the seat of the chair. And again, from this position where my back is round, then I close the zipper, I roll the pelvis, and in the same time, and then I leave my lips, but I don't leave the support that I brought to the body. And I stay with it a few seconds. And then gradually I leave it and try to feel if something in the body, in the pelvis, in the pelvic cavity gets more loose. So with the time, we start to identify that actually this is our pelvic floor, and this is the movement of our pelvic floor. But let's add another small exercise. Again, we roll the pelvis forward, and we raise our body, and we close the zipper, and we do the stroke, and we leave it. And now, and leave the lips, but not the support. And now let's think that our lips contract like for a kiss. And we do only the first part of the kiss. So we create the vacuum with the lips. And then we leave the vacuum, but we don't open the vacuum noisily, but just go back and forward with this vacuum. And you can breathe doing it, but don't inhale strongly. And again, while doing it, try to feel if it pulls the pelvic floor up, and then when you leave, the pelvic floor goes down, up and down. And you will see that you get taller when you do it. And this is because you have all the components of the posture that join together. And this is very important to say, that sometimes if we don't have all the components, then we might feel pain, for example, in our back or in the diaphragm muscle, or in the back of the neck. But if we know to combine, to integrate all the components together, and each one is donating his part synergetically, then there is no pain, and it's actually a very good feeling of ease in our body, even though many components participate, and it seems like there is more work, but since it's not a burden on certain area, then the feeling is a feeling of lightness and not of a burden. So let's go back to the slide. Here in this slide, we see the lungs, the heart. You can see the heart here, and here is the diaphragm muscle. You can see how it's domed, like actually it has two domes. The left one is a little lower than the right one because the heart is right above it. But anyway, you can see this wide muscle that is actually all from the front to the back of our body. And this is the breathing muscle. So when we inhale, this muscle is going downwards and it pulls the lungs inside and downwards, and it sucks air inside into the lungs. But when seeing this muscle, and here we see it also, we see the liver under it, seeing this muscle, we can understand how it is the ceiling of the structure. Because when it's going down, of course, then the whole inner organs are also going down. And they're going down towards the pelvic floor. So there are different kinds of breathing. There is a way that the diaphragm muscle is going down dramatically, and there is a different way, which is called ribs breathing. And this is more when the chest is expanding to the side. So of course the diaphragm muscle is going downwards, but the chest is going to the side and going a little upwards. When the ribs are going to the side, they go upwards. So there is not so much pressure on the pelvic floor. But it's not that we say that certain breathing is legitimated and others are not. But in different action, in different daily action, we use different kind of breathing. And it's very important to know that to protect our pelvic floor, we have to also know how to breathe in that we let the chest expand and not only the diaphragmatic kind of breathing. Here we see very clearly the structure that I spoke about, that we don't see the pelvic floor. We know that it's down here, and we don't see the inner organs because they are behind the intestines. But we see the diaphragm muscle, and we don't see also the belly wall, but we can understand that how the muscles of the belly wall are like the front wall of this structure. And we see also that there is no open space. So every intra pressure of the chest, if the chest is rigid, of the muscles of the shoulders or the back of the neck that doesn't enable the chest to move freely, it will end in pressure on the intra-abdominal pressure and pressure burden on the pelvic floor. So a few important facts. Okay, this is in Hebrew, but I will translate it. Maybe some of you know Hebrew. So like every other muscle or muscular system, it is dynamic. Our body is dynamic, and again, we cannot isolate. It's a big mistake to isolate the pelvic floor, the muscular system of the pelvic floor. So it's acting differently during our different actions and during the different parts of our day. So it's different when we sleep, and it's different when we get up. When we sleep, there is certain muscle tone always in the sphincters of the pelvic floor, but but the diaphragm muscle and the whole muscle tone is very weak, and this is why there is much less intra-abdominal pressure. But right after we wake up, even if we're still lying in bed, we can feel suddenly much bigger urge to urinate than when we were asleep. And this is because our breathing and muscle tone changes. The second thing is carrying weight. Our pelvic floor has to change, has to get ready, so to speak, for carrying weight, because it's if we don't activate it in a coordinated way to the weight that we would like to carry, then it will press it downwards, the weight. So if the pelvic floor is not working, is not reacting in a coordinated way, then it's pushed downwards. So speaking about carrying weight, so it can be side bag, it can be backpack, it can be carrying bags in our hands, it can be lifting a baby. Everything that we lift, the pelvic floor should be part of it. And the third thing is different daily actions when we sit, when we stand, when we walk, when we kneel. So for example, when we sit, if we sit like I'm sitting now, that I'm not leaning against the back of the chair, so my back muscles are active, and this means that the whole postural muscles are active. The pelvic floor, the pelvic wall, the abdominal wall, the transverse abdominis muscles, and also the inner muscles that we have in the pelvis, for example, the vagina and their ligaments, their tissues that are supporting also the inner organs. So they are part of this sitting. And when we're standing, there is no possibility to give a vacation to our back muscles and also not to our pelvic floor. Another thing that affects our pelvic floor is if we're tired. The pelvic floor is dramatically affected if we're tired physically. So I always say that if you're too tired and you have the option, then don't go shopping, because it's very difficult to support properly the pelvic floor when we are tired. And also when we are mentally weak, it makes us, sink into ourselves, and the whole energy is low, and this is heavy on our floor, on our pelvic floor. Main reasons for weakness of the pelvic floor. So I put first the postural muscles. Sometimes you see women that they're not fat, they look great, and you see that they have very severe prolapses. And this is because it might be that the chest is rigid and the pelvic floor, they don't know how to activate the pelvic floor as part of the posture. And this starts to degenerate more and more with the age. Poor posture, this means that, for example, if the chest is low, many times we see people that you hardly see a neck there, and the back of the neck. And sometimes people are bent forward. And I think by now you understand that this creates intra-abdominal pressure, and this ends in burden on the pelvic floor. Genetics is also affecting, but some women have genetically weaker pelvic floor than others, but it doesn't mean that they cannot function normally. One just has to know how to activate those areas, and even if they cannot jump on trampoline, okay, but they should be able to function normally during the daily functions. Habits habits has to do with the weak postural muscles and poor posture. And these are habits that we get. It can be from our experiences as children, and can be some things that derive from our parents. Both physical and mental weakness and fatigue, as I explained before, consuming food and drinks which increase urinating. So this will not make our muscles weak to start with, but can it can cause the bladder to contract strongly. For example, coffee and tea, chocolate, sparkled drinks, they all accelerate the contraction of the bladder. But if a woman has more and more experiences, or experiencing more and more strong contractions of the bladder that she feels that she cannot control, then with a time it will get to be chronic. She will feel that it's part of her. But this can be solved if a woman has awareness to this issue. If she had coffee, if she drank coffee, and she knows that now it might be that the bladder will contract strongly, but it's not something abnormal with the whole system. Pregnancies and birth giving, you see that on purpose I didn't put it among the first topics, because I don't think it is as dramatic as doctors and physiotherapists describe it. I think that if women know how to activate the belly muscles and the pelvic floor during the pregnancy and know how to practice it, then there is no reason for weakening. It might take a while before they go back to their normal function, but it's possible. Overweight. I think that usually the body is how should I say, getting used to the weight and compensating and doing what's necessary to activate the. It might take a while when a woman gains weight, but then the body gets organized to the overweight. But of course, overweight might cause us to feel clumsy and less, to move less, and this can affect also dramatically the pelvic floor. Hormonal change is very dramatic. In the menopause, women suddenly can experience a dramatic change in the function of their pelvic floor and the sphincter and control on the urine. And this usually is very surprising for the women, but there is less blood, less hormones that get to this area, and this causes these changes. But if women know how to treat this area, how to make this area part of their daily actions, so this will solve it more or less, and this will help a lot in this issue, because the area will be active during the day. So then the blood goes there, and it improves very much the situation. What I write here, distance from the floor, this means that we're not sitting on low chairs, we're not sitting on the floor, or we do it very little. And this causes situation, causes us to not activate certain muscles, and the pelvic floor is part of it, or not activate them in a wider way. That if we would have been sitting down, like in children, so the whole body is more active. Also the legs muscles, that sometimes you see women that they would like to pick something from the floor, so they don't bend their legs, they send their hands down, whereas they bend their back, but they don't fold their legs. because the legs muscles degenerate when we don't act, when we're not activating it. So the pelvic floor is more or less the same. So now this whole part is in Hebrew, but this is because we reached the part that I am offering the course, the Retzef, my method course, and actually the course, there is the basic course and the progressive course, and the basic course includes 10 meetings and the progressive course another 10 meetings. And actually I finished 2 weeks ago a course in English, the first course that I that I did in English. And the course, the first course, the first 10 meetings is explaining about the sequence of the breathing and the connection to the pelvic floor and how to activate the pelvic floor with a breathing system, as we demonstrated a little bit. And the work of the pelvic floor against intra-abdominal pressure, for example, when we cough or sneeze or laugh, then there is a very strong intra-abdominal pressure, and how to activate the pelvic floor and the pelvic cavity and the belly and the whole system, the diaphragm muscle, to prevent strong intra-abdominal pressure that might cause urine to drop out. Activating the transverse muscles is a very important part of the course. Upset bladder, we speak about it somewhat, but since it is also a mental issue, then we try to sense, to feel what happens in the body. I guide the women to feel what happens in the body when there is the phenomena of upset bladder. But women feel, and this helps them to be more aware what happens. So they feel not, helpless, completely helpless. They feel that they can do something, that they have some control. And with a good work of distracting the thoughts, then it can help very much. And another thing that we work in the course is how to separate the muscles of the legs from the pelvic floor, because sometimes we activate the muscles, the adductor muscles that are in the inner side of our legs, and we think that we activate the pelvic floor, but actually it's completely different muscles. And sometimes when we activate those muscles of the legs, it stimulates the urine system, it stimulates the bladder to contract. So we are using those muscles, but to start with, there is no need to use them. We're using it only when it's a, urgent need to urinate and we don't have another choice. Okay, so here, if some of you read Hebrew, so they can read what women wrote, women that participated in the course. And if there are questions, then you can ask now. Well, you can also address me on my phone number. I can write here my phone number. I will stop the screen sharing and I will write my phone number. And if I believe that you have my phone number, but if some of you don't have, so I can write it here. Feel comfortable to ask questions if you have. Okay, so if there are no questions, so we can finish here, and thank you for joining me, and I hope that I'm sure that it brought new information, because it's not known what I'm speaking about, and it's very important for every woman. So bye-bye, shalom to everyone.